Let's start then. Welcome everybody. Great to see that so many of you are interested in learning about Go. Couple housekeeping notes before I start. If anything is unclear about the stuff that I'm presenting, please interrupt me or use the raise hand feature, but ask your question right there and don't wait till the end. That's probably best. Second, I will, of course, show you a Go board while I'm presenting, and I am not doing that as a screen share, but it's going to be part of my camera setup. So because Google Meet is not going to enlarge that automatically, you might want to hover over my video and click that pin needle icon so it enlarges my video feed, so you can see everything well. And third, I will be saying a couple things about things like pronunciation and etymology of, in particular, Chinese and Japanese words. And I don't speak either of those languages. So I'm saying those things to the best of my knowledge and abilities. But if there's anybody here who speaks any of those languages and notices me making a mistake, please do correct me. I want to say these things right. And either way, maybe don't take my word for it. Okay, with those out of the way, let's talk about Go. And I'm going to start with a little bit of history because there's a lot of that. Go is the oldest board game that is still being played to this day. Some legends have it as old as 4,000 years old. We think that is a little bit too much. We think it's probably 3,000, maybe 3,500 years old. And the earliest written records of this game that we know of are 2,500 years old. So we know it's at least that old. The game comes from China. That's where it was invented. And in China, this game is called Weiqi, which means surrounding board game. It's a board game where you surround things. So it's a very descriptive name. From China, this game made it to Japan around the 7th century. So that would be about 1400-ish years ago. And if you take the Chinese characters you used to write Weiqi, but use a Japanese pronunciation to say them, you say Igo. And that's why this game in Japan is called Igo, or just Go. From Japan, the game made it to Europe through a German scientist called Oskar Korschelt, who had lived in Japan for a couple years in the 1870s, 1880s. And back in Germany, he wrote a treatise on the game. And that's how it gained popularity. It spread through Germany and Europe and also made it to the US. And because the game came here from Japan, we used the Japanese name Go, or Go as we pronounce it, for this game. So humans have been playing this game for a very long time, but these days there are other entities that also play Go. Computers. AIs, if you will. And AIs have traditionally been pretty bad at playing Go. If you think about chess, which is a game that gets compared to Go quite a lot, it took until the 1990s, late 1990s, until computers were playing chess well enough to beat top human chess players. In Go, it took until 2016, so that was 8 years ago, when computers were finally playing Go well enough to beat top human players. And this is not because the rules are so complex or complicated to explain to a computer. They are not. These rules are pretty simple. And I will explain them to you in a minute. But the amazing depths that emerge out of these rules are so vast that it's just completely impossible to compute all these variations that come out of it. In order to narrow down the possibilities to figure out where to play, you need something like human intuition and a sense of shape. And that's the kind of thing that is really hard to teach a computer. Now, in order to gain that intuition and really learn playing this game, what you really should do is play. Ideally against a slightly stronger player, who can point out certain things to you, maybe mistakes, subtleties, that kind of thing. But this isn't really the right setting for that here, so I will not be playing a teaching game against all of you. But if anybody is interested later on, ping me on Slack. I'd love to play with you. But what I'll do here instead, I will give you a couple learning resources at the end. I'll post those in Slack as well. But what I'll do in this presentation is show you a couple of examples of these complexities that emerge out of the rules, these amazing concepts that appear out of these very simple rules. And I want to do that to get you excited. If you will, I want to nerd snipe you into trying out Go. Yes, this game is easy to learn, but that doesn't mean it is simple or boring or anything like that. This game is very hard to master, but still very accessible to start. Before I start talking about the rules, I do want to mention that there are a couple of different rule sets that you may see mentioned in a couple of places. The best known ones are the so-called Japanese rules and Chinese rules. There are a couple other ones as well. The differences between these various rule sets are very small, and they don't usually change how you play the game in practice. So you don't have to worry about this, but I did want to mention that that's a thing. The rules that I will be explaining here are the Japanese rules. Okay, what do you need to play Go? Well, first of all, you need 2 players. Go is a 2-player board game. And once you have 2 players, you also need a board and you need stones. White stones and black stones. 1 color for each player. And the game then starts with the black player placing a stone on the board. Anywhere. There are literally no rules. But of course, there are typical starting positions that might be something like that. And then it's white's turn. And white places a stone on the board. Anywhere. Still no rules. Maybe something like that. Then it's black's turn again. And then it's white's turn again. So players take turns. You may have noticed that I'm placing these stones on the intersections of these lines on the board, and not like you may expect from chess inside these fields. In Go, we place the stones on the intersections of these board lines. And that includes the ones on the sides and even in the corner. Those are part of the board. Once placed, stones never move. They may eventually be taken off the board again, we'll get to that, but they never move around. Once placed, they stay where they are. Speaking of these board lines, what you see here is a 19 by 19 board. So there's 19 lines in this direction and 19 lines in that direction, for a total of 19 times 19, 361 intersections that you can play on. This is the most common board size that's being played on, but it's not the only typical board size. In particular, beginners will often start the game on a 9 by 9 board because it's just not as overwhelming as starting on the huge big board immediately. But even advanced players may once in a while play a game on a 9 by 9 board because it makes for a fun, quick game. And between the 19 by 19 and the 9 by 9 board, there is one other typical board size, a medium if you will, and that is the 13 by 13 board. And that is what we'll be using today because it's a good size for explaining everything, and it also means we can zoom in a little bit. Okay, we're almost done with the basics. There is one important question that we should still answer. This is a game, right? Who wins? Who is the winner in this game? So I did say earlier that the game in Chinese is called Weiqi, surrounding board game. And that is exactly what players do. They surround territory with their stones. Something like this, maybe. And that. And maybe something like this. And of course, players don't just throw a handful of stones on the board and then line them up neatly like I'm doing that right now. This happens over the course of the game. But you're going to see these territories appear. And you're often going to see them in the corners and on the sides of the board. You can also surround territory in the middle, but you're going to need more stones for it because you have to surround from all sides. While in the corners and on the sides, the edges of the board help you a little bit. So once the game is over, the players count how much territory has been surrounded. And the territory is all the empty intersections that have been surrounded by one color. So this particular white territory here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 points of territory. And players count all the territories, and you get 1 point for each point of territory, and whichever player has the most point wins. It is that simple. Now, I did say you count points when the game is over, but when is that? When is this game over? There is no king to kill, which would signify the end of the game or anything like that. No, one of the cool things about Go is the game is over when both players agree that the game is over. The way that works in practice is you don't have to place a stone. You can also pass instead. Say I'm not placing a stone. And when both players pass in succession, that means both players agree there is nothing left to do here. So the game is over. All right, those were the basics. Now let's get to the 2 rules of Go. Yes, there are 2 rules. And the first rule is the rule of groups, liberties, and death. I did say that in the beginning you're often going to see stones being placed near the corners, so they start very isolated, but things don't stay that way. Eventually there's going to be stones everywhere, and in particular you're going to have stones sitting next to each other. So let's play a couple of example moves. Let's say black plays here and white comes close. On an empty board, these may not be the best moves, but over the course of the game, this kind of thing can happen. And then black makes this little thing here a bit longer, and white does the same thing. And then black peeks around the corner here a little bit, and white says, stop moving into my area. And black says, okay, fine, I'll put back. And then white reinforces this boundary a little bit, and then black peeks around the other corner, and so on and so on. Shapes like this appear. And stones of the same color that sit next to each other, either horizontally or vertically, not diagonally. There are no diagonals in Go whatsoever. Stones that sit next to each other horizontally or vertically form groups. So in this picture here, you're seeing 4 groups, 2 white groups and 2 black groups. The 2 white groups have 2 stones each. There is 1 black group that consists of 1, 2, 3, 4 stones. And there's 1 black group that only consists of a single stone. If white now also plays here, white connects these 2 small white groups into 1 big group of 5 stones. But without that, there is no connection here, just like there is no connection here. Again, no diagonals. Okay, those were groups, and groups have a property called liberties. In German, liberties are called Freiheiten, that also translates to liberties. In Chinese, a liberty is called qi, which means breath. And I actually like that a lot better. Not just because it's a little bit more poetic, but also because it's a little bit better at explaining what's going on here if you think of these groups as organisms. So the liberties of a group are all the adjacent intersections next to any of the stones in the group. So this particular black group here has 1, 2, 3, not this one, not diagonally, 4, 5, 6, 7. This intersection sits next to 2 different stones of the group. That's fine. 8, 9 liberties. This black group has 9 liberties. And if now all the liberties of a group are covered by stones of the opponent's colors. So in this case, 8 of the 9 liberties are covered by white stones. And if white now places a stone on the final liberty, takes away the final breath, then this organism suffocates. So as soon as white places a stone on the final open liberty, this black group dies, or is killed, or is captured. All of these words are used interchangeably. And they get taken off the board. And white actually gets to keep them. That's why the lid of the bowl is here. And at the end of the game, when players count points, as I said earlier with the territories, you also get 1 point for each prisoner, as these are called. So you're usually going to get most of your points from territory, but you do get 1 point for each stone that you've captured. Now, there is a subtlety to this that I do want to mention. If you look at this situation here, and in particular, if you look at this point here in the middle of the 4 black stones, if white decides to place a stone there, then as soon as this stone is placed on the board, it has no open liberties. All the 4 liberties of this white stone are already covered by black stones. So as soon as this black stone was placed on the board, this stone was dead and gets taken off the board again. So that was rather pointless, but it's also actually illegal. You're not allowed to play these so-called suicide moves. And this is one exception from the whole you can play anywhere rule. There's going to be one more exception, but that's it. There's just 2. Okay, but there's a subtlety to this subtlety. And that is when there's also white stone here. Because now white is allowed to play here. And that is what I call this is not an official name. This is what I call the shoot first, ask questions later rule. Because white is allowed to play here since it removes the last remaining liberty of this black stone. This black stone only has 1 liberty left, and if white now plays here, that is taken away. And that's what I mean by shoot first, ask questions later. You shoot first, you check if you're killing anything, and yes, you're killing this black stone. And then you ask questions like, am I even still alive? And yes, now this white stone is alive because it has a liberty that was just freed. So in that case, this whole move was legal in the first place and was not a suicide move. All right, that was rule number 1. And now comes rule number 2. And actually, let's keep this situation from right now. This rule is the so-called co-rule. And this is already sort of a special case rule but the special case is common enough that I think it deserves mentioning from the get-go. The etymology of the word ko, we spell that K-O, is apparently still a little bit disputed. But one possible source is a word out of Hinduism and Buddhism that means something like a very, very long time, something related to the age of the universe. And that would be a fitting description, as you'll see in a bit. So I did just say that white is allowed to play here and shoot first, ask questions later, kill this black stone. So white has played, it's now black's turn. And black now notices that the white stone that was just played only has one liberty left. So black can play it, shoot first, ask questions later, and kill this white stone. And now it's white's turn again. And white can fill the only remaining liberty of this black stone and kill it. And now it's black's turn, and black can kill this white stone. And you can tell that from this point on, this is going to be a really boring game. And that is why this is just not allowed. This is called a ko. And the ko rule forbids this infinite repetition. And you can see where that whole very long time comes from. So what is actually allowed? I did say white is allowed to play here and take this black stone. But now black is not allowed to immediately take back. Black has to play somewhere else. Black is not allowed to play here. And that's the second exception from the you can play anywhere rule. And the exact definition of the ko rule is you're not allowed to play in a way that immediately repeats the previous board position. So white has to play somewhere else because playing there would just rewind the whole thing by one move. And so black plays somewhere else, and now it's white's turn. And white can either play in here, thereby ending this whole infinitely repeating thing. Or white can say, okay, I don't want to play there right now. And since black played there, maybe I also want to play there or something like that. And now it's black's turn again. And now black is allowed to play here. Because that would not be repeating the previous position, right? There's new stones that just appeared here. So this is a different situation now. So black is now allowed to take back here. And now white is not allowed to play here immediately. He has to play somewhere else first. So that was the ko rule. And it has some interesting consequences that we'll see in a bit. But for now, this is it. These were all the rules of Go. And everything else that I'm going to show you from this point on are consequences of these rules. And I want to make sure that you keep that in mind. I'm not showing you new rules as much as I'm showing you what follows from those simple rules that I just showed you. And I'm also going to tell you a couple of names of certain situations or concepts, things like that. And I'm not telling you those names so you remember them. You don't have to. I'm just telling you these names so you realize that these things have names. Those are notable patterns that players recognize in their games over and over again. That's why they were given names. Let's start by building up a little thing in the corner. And all the stuff that I'm building up here now is going to be fairly artificial, right? The board is not actually going to look like this after real play. With all the stones crammed into one corner. We assume that there's stones everywhere, right? These white stones are connected to more white stones. There's also black stones. It's not the idea that this is the full board. It's the idea that we're looking at one particular situation that could appear in one particular corner during the game. So what's going on with these black stones? If you happen to have watched the Lord Ravenscraft video on YouTube about the Go game in the movie Knives Out, you might think that this is 1 point for black. 1 point of territory, right? But it's not. And you don't have to watch that video. It's not particularly good. This is in fact 7 points for white. And I'll show you why. These black stones are dead. And that is because white can kill them anytime white wants, and there's nothing black can do about it. So how would white kill them? White plays on the last remaining liberty that this black group still has, shoots first, asks questions later, and these 3 stones are taken off the board. So white can kill this group. Can black do anything about it? No. Black cannot play here to prevent white from playing there, because now this black group has no liberties left. So this is a suicide move, and that's not allowed. So white can kill it, black cannot prevent that. And that means these stones are dead. And they actually remain on the board until the end of the game usually. And then when the game is over, both players are going to be in complete agreement that yes, these stones are dead. They get taken off the board, added to white's prisoners. And now white has 1, 2, 3, 4 points of territory. 1, 2, 3 prisoners for a total of 7 points. And white actually avoids taking these stones off the board during the game by playing here, because if it did that, that white stone would now be sitting there and covering a point of territory. So those would only be 3 points of territory. So these stones just stay on the board until the game is over, and then both players agree that these are dead. White can kill them, black cannot prevent that. Right. Yes, Jonathan.
So this is funny to me. So if I was the black player and I was that situation where I had 1 liberty open, like, I don't know, maybe I'm cutthroat, but I'd be like, I don't care if you're going to be losing a point. I want you to put that white piece down and force me to remove my pieces from the board, because that's what the rules say. Is there any way to make that, or is it kind of just like a gentleman's agreement that that's kind of dead?
Hi. Future Ben here. Jonathan asked a really good question there, and I didn't really do a good job of answering that question during the presentation, so I want to try this again. Jonathan's point is, what is stopping the black player in this situation from insisting that white actually play here to take these stones off the board during the game, thereby losing this 1 point of territory? Why would black agree to have these taken off the board at the end of the game without that white stone being played? Because they are dead. Interestingly, under the Chinese rules, it doesn't make a difference. Under the Chinese rules, which use a slightly different system of counting points called area scoring, instead of territory plus prisoners, under those counting rules, white can play here, take these off the board, and is not going to lose a point through this stone. So if you're playing under Chinese rules and the black player insisted on these stones actively being taken off the board, then the white player could just roll their eyes, play that stone, take them off the board, and it doesn't make a difference. And because it doesn't make a difference, there's no point in black insisting on it in the first place. And I did say earlier that the different rule sets shouldn't change how the game is played and who wins. But it appears that there is a difference here. So, if under the Chinese rules, we can conclude from the rules that these stones are dead and are taken off the board at the end of the game, but under the Japanese rules, we cannot make this conclusion from the rules, then that must mean that under the Japanese system, this is an actual rule that dead stones are taken off the board at the end of the game without the player actually having to kill them. And that is correct. This is an actual rule. For the rule lawyers among us, I looked it up. It's Article 10, Clause 1 of the 1989 Japanese rules. Back to the presentation. So we've looked at a situation where we have one inside liberty there. Let's see what happens with a group that has two of these open inside points. And once again, artificially surround this thing. What's going on with this black group? Is it alive? Is it dead? Can white kill it? Can black prevent it from being killed? And the answer is no. This group is still very much dead. White can kill it, and black can't do anything about it. How does white kill it? Well, white starts by filling a liberty here. And now you might say, but wait, now it's black's turn. Black can play here and kill this white stone that was just played. And that is absolutely true. Black can do that. But now, what you have is a black group that has only one of those inside liberties left. And we've already seen over here that this is dead. So white can kill this. Can black prevent that? No. What is black going to do? If black were to play in here, then black would immediately create the situation with only one inside liberty. And now it's white's turn, and white is going to play there and kill that whole group. So this group is still dead. White can kill it, black cannot prevent that. So we had 1, we had 2. Now let's look at a group that has 3 of these inside points. And once again, surround it with white stones. What's going on with this group? Is it alive? Is it dead? Can white kill it? Can black prevent it from being killed? And the answer is a different one this time. The answer this time is it depends. It depends on who plays first. If it's white's turn, white can kill this group. If it's black's turn, black can save this group. So let's see what white does to kill it. White plays on the middle of these 3 spots. And now it's black's turn. And let's first say black does not react over there. We'll think about that other situation in a minute, but let's for now say black doesn't respond here, and it's white's turn again, and white can play another stone. And, well, if black again doesn't do anything, then white also plays the 3rd liberty, and these stones are off the board because that's the last remaining liberty. So black probably wants to do something. So black plays here, kills these 2 white stones. But now this is literally the same situation as over here. And we've just seen that that is dead. So this is dead. So maybe it was not a good idea from black to not respond to this at all. Well, but if black responds here, we're playing somewhere in here, there or there, then once again we have a black group that only has a single liberty that white can now play on. And this group is dead. And those were all the potential variations. So as soon as white has played on this middle spot here, this black group was dead. Let's think about what happens if white doesn't play in the middle, but on one of the outside spots. Because now black can play on the middle, which kills this white stone. And now we have an interesting new situation. we have 2 of these inside spots, just like we had here. But this time, there is a wall in between them. And this has a consequence that white cannot play on either of those inside spots. Imagine white playing here. This black group still has an open liberty. This black group is still alive. Shoot first, ask questions later does not apply because this move doesn't kill anything. So this is a suicide move and is not allowed. And the same thing over here. If white plays there, then there's still an open liberty here, and this black group is still alive. So this is not allowed either. So if white wanted to kill this black group now, white would have to play on 2 spots simultaneously. And that's not a thing. So white cannot kill this group. I did say in this situation, it depends on who plays first. If white plays first, white can kill it, but we just saw white has to play in the middle to do that. And I also said, if it's black's turn in this situation, black can save this group. How does it do it? We've just seen the trick. Black takes the middle and creates these 2 separate inside spots. These 2 separate spots are called the eyes of the group. And that is the one word I would maybe encourage you to remember if you're in any way inclined to pick up Go, because this is one of the first things that a Go player learns. A group with 2 eyes is alive. It cannot be killed. In our example here, these eyes are 1 point each, but it doesn't have to be that way. They can also be larger, as long as they are separated, or at least can easily be separated. So while we were talking, I've built up a new situation here, but I've kept the thing up there or down there from your perspective. And I've added another black group here. And that's another one of those that we just saw with 1, 2, 3 open inside spots. And we just said that it's unclear whether this group is dead or alive. Right? It depends on who plays first. But in this case, the situation is slightly different. Because if white comes in here now and tries to kill this group, by preventing it from making 2 eyes, there's now something that black can do. Does anybody see it? Any idea? Black plays here. And by playing here, black connects these 2 groups, this black group and this black group, into one big black group. And the group up there was already alive. It was unkillable because it has 2 eyes. So if that part cannot be killed, then this whole thing cannot be killed. So what if white plays there to prevent that connection from happening? Well, then black can say, all right, let's play here to make 2 eyes because you robbed me of that connection up there. And let's make sure I have 2 eyes and am independently alive. Right.
Before, when you had that white piece, you made the connection and you kind of flipped those.
Yes.
Right? Would black win that white piece that was there if they had that next move? So white, yeah. So if white,
this one?
Yeah. So black connected it. Would black win that white piece? That 1/1
Yes.
white.
Excellent question. Yes. This is now a dead white stone. Excellent point. So because this black group is alive, it cannot be killed. Anything that it surrounds, that does not itself have 2 eyes, I guess, is dead. So this is now a white dead stone. That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we've seen that black has options here. Right? White takes one, black takes the other. And there's a Japanese term for that. These 2 points are called miyai for the life of the group. They are equivalent alternatives. White takes away one possibility, black just takes the other one. And because black has options here, black actually doesn't have to do anything right now. Because black knows that white ever comes here and creates mischief, then it can react and save the group. So it's not going to be a problem. And that means for now, black can worry about things elsewhere on the board. Speaking of elsewhere on the board, let's assume elsewhere on the board, things have also been happening. And once again, this is a little bit artificial. We assume there are 2 black groups. And these black stones here are connected to more stones there. And these black stones are connected to more stones here, right? That's not the important thing. The important thing is that there are 2 black groups. And they are 2 groups. They are not connected. There's an open spot here. And we assume that black would like to connect these 2 groups by also playing here. Maybe it's a similar situation as over here, where maybe one of the 2 groups is alive and the other one isn't. And by connecting them, black creates a big living group. Or maybe one of the 2 black groups has 1 eye, and the other group also has 1 eye. And by connecting the 2 groups, black creates a big group with 2 eyes that is then unkillable, unconditionally alive. So black wants to connect there, but unfortunately there's also a couple white stones in the area that prevent this connection, at least for the time being. And what white would like to do is also play here, which connects all of these white stones into one big white group that forever splits these 2 black groups apart. They can no longer be connected. Right? Because if black really wants to connect these 2 groups, then white really wants to keep them apart. That's usually how that works. So white wants to play here, but it's not white's turn. We say it's black's turn. And black notices that this stone that prevents this connection here from happening only has 1 liberty left. So black can play here, shoot first, ask questions later, and kill this white stone. And on the next move, black would like to then also play here, thereby finishing up this connection. But it's not black's turn yet. Black just took here, so it's white's turn now. And white notices that this black stone here only has 1 liberty, so white can kill it. So white plays here and kills this black stone. Does anybody notice that I'm doing something wrong? This is not allowed. What was the name of that rule?
Ko?
The ko rule, exactly. This is a ko. By taking back here, white immediately recreates the previous board position. So white is not allowed to play here right now. White has to play somewhere else first. But white doesn't want to play somewhere else because white knows if it plays somewhere else, then it's black's turn again, and black is gonna play here and connect the 2 groups into one big black group, just like it wanted. And that's what white's trying to prevent. So what can white do? White needs to find a threat. It's actually called a co-threat. That is so severe that black has to respond immediately and has no time to play here to connect. And so white plays here. And we've seen what that means. If black now says, nope, I insist, I'm connecting my two groups here, then white can also play here. And now white has taken away both options. This black group is disconnected and can no longer make two eyes. This black group is now dead. And so there's suddenly 7 dead black stones on the board. And all of this suddenly turned into white territory. So black is losing a lot of points by connecting here and allowing white to kill this. And black probably doesn't want to do that. So after white has taken the one option here, black is probably going to play here, create two eyes, make sure this group stays alive. And now it's white's turn again. And now the board position has changed. There were new stones played here. And that means white can now play here and take back. The co-rule no longer applies. And now the co-rule applies for black. Black is not allowed to take back immediately. Black has to play somewhere else and ideally find a threat, a co-threat that white has to respond to immediately. Otherwise, white is going to connect and prevent the black group from connecting. And this can go back and forth for quite a while, but eventually it's going to end. It's not infinite because the board situation changes every time. Right? And eventually there's just no more potential threats left that any of the players can play. So eventually one of the two players is going to end this. Either white by playing here, making this into one white group and keeping the two black groups forever apart, or black, if black is the lucky player, by connecting here. And whichever player prevails there is said to have won this co-fight. This whole thing is called a co-fight. And as you've seen, it extends across the whole board. That was exciting. Let's build up one more little smaller thing. Once again, artificial, but something like this can appear in a game. And again, we're not thinking about the stones on the outside. All right, we assume these black stones are connected to more black stones. These white stones are connected to more white stones. Those are not what's interesting here. They are not getting killed. What we're thinking about is the stones on the inside. What's going on with those? Are those dead? Are those alive? Can they be killed? Or can a player prevent them from being killed? Well, let's try it. Let's be black. And let's try killing these white stones. In order to do that, we have to fill liberty. But now it's white's turn. And white notices that by playing here, black has not only taken away a liberty from the white group, black has also taken away a liberty from itself. And that means white can now play this final liberty, shoot first, ask questions later, and kill this black group. And now white has 4 additional black prisoners and 4 additional points of territory, just because black tried to kill white. So that probably wasn't a good idea from black. So what about white? White has the exact same problem. If white tries to kill black, it needs to fill a liberty and thereby also fills its own liberty. And now it's black's turn, and black can play the final liberty. Shoot first, ask questions later. Kill these stones. And now black has 5 additional white prisoners and 5 extra points of territory, only because white tried to kill black. So white probably doesn't want to do that either. So in this situation, black doesn't want to kill white. White doesn't want to kill black. Nobody wants to kill anyone. And that means these stones are going to sit there peacefully until the end of the game. Nobody is getting any points of territory for this. This is not territory. No single color is surrounding them. But these stones are alive in what in Japanese is called seki, in mutual life. This situation is called a seki. And that feels like a nice, peaceful conclusion after all the killing that we've been doing. And that's all the board positions that we have time for today. But before I finish, I want to tell you 2 fun facts about the physical play. It's 2024, and that means if you are going to pick up playing Go, you're probably going to be playing online a lot. And that's fine. The rules are exactly the same, whether you play them on a computer or on a real board. But there are a couple of things about the physical over-the-board play that I really enjoy, so I want to tell you about them. And the first one concerns the fields that are created between the board lines, like this one here. Don't these fields look like squares to you? They are not. These fields are not squares. They are elongated a little bit in this direction. If you took a ruler and measured, this is 22 millimeters, but this is almost 24 millimeters. And the reason this is done that way is because if the two of us, you and me, are sitting at a table over a Go board and playing a game of Go, then both of us are going to have this angled downwards perspective on the board, just like you now have from the camera. And Go is not only about the game, but also about things like aesthetics and balance and symmetry. And this perspective destroys that symmetry because things in this direction look different from things in that direction. Because everything shrinks a little bit like this. And so you have to compensate for this perspective to restore that balance. And that's why Go boards are a little bit longer in this direction. And that's a pretty cool, fun fact, I think. And it shows you how many centuries have gone into thinking about this game. And it also means that if you ever end up playing a game of Go in real life, you have to make sure to place the board correctly. Because if you rotate this thing 90 degrees now, everything would look squished a little bit. And the second thing I want to show you is something that you may already have noticed. So if you imagine I gave you an object the size of a ghost stone and asked you to do something with it. Imagine putting a coin into a vending machine, for example. Chances are you would do that by holding it like this, with your thumb and your index finger. Because that is how we hold things, with the thumb and one other finger, usually the index finger. But you may have noticed that I haven't usually been playing stones like this. I've been placing and holding them like this. And this is actually how most Go players hold and play stones. And first of all, I do think it looks a little bit more elegant. So maybe there's a coolness factor there. You may or may not agree with that. But there's also a practical reason. If you imagine this board after a lot of play, there are stones everywhere, and then there's this one empty point that you really want to play on. You want to be careful not to kick away any of the stones that are already there while placing your stone. And it turns out that that's a little bit harder if you use your thumb to hold the stone, because it's fairly easy to, with your thumb, kick away the stone that was sitting right there. But if you hold the stone between your index finger and your middle finger, it's fairly easy to position it precisely. Just release the index finger and the stone slides into place. And that is why most Go players hold in place stilts, like this. Right, those were 2 fun facts, but they were just that. Fun facts, right? They don't change the rules. And if you play online, you're not holding anything between your fingers. You're clicking or tapping your screen. And the perspective thing also doesn't matter, because on your screen, you're going to have an actual top-down perspective of a real square. Right? So none of this matters, and none of this certainly changes the rules. Nothing there changes how you play the game. But it does change how you play the game. Any questions?